Welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host, Kai Yuda, and in this episode 50 by the way, gee, it has taken a while to get here. It's been a long and slow burn, this one. But in this episode, we are going to be rattling and singing up a storm, or at least metaphorically or symbolically, maybe. We might be. So I'm chatting with someone who's been involved in the psychedelic, shamanic space for many years, and originally she has a background within the conventional Western medical system and made a big pivot into assisting change makers, way showers, other people with the healing and awakening process through an integration of holistic medicine, embodied transformation, working with indigenous healers and traditional medicines, sacred song. She's been in the psychedelic retreat and healing space for a long time now, and I'm curious to see where this conversation's gonna go. So it is the ceremonial space holder, ex-ER physician, sharing her prayers, rattle in hand with her new yet ancient vision. It's the spiritual chiropractor and psychedelic advocate making a stand for these powerful sacraments, Dr. Alex Pardhy. Here we are, let's go.
Kaida, thank you so much for that intro. That's like, I'm gonna just play that every morning.
All right, give us a reference point for where you are in time and space right now.
I'm currently in Ibiza. The moment we stop this podcast, I'll be running a Cambo ceremony followed by a mushroom ceremony this evening. There's flies everywhere, so excuse me if they're coming up from Africa. So yeah, I'm batting them away. And yeah, I'm based geographically normally in England, and yeah, planning to actually move to Peru later this year, where I just feel so deeply connected, and I'm really feeling called to put roots down. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, you've been on the road for quite a while now, for as far as I'm aware. Like, you kind of move with the seasons, don't you?
Yeah, I've definitely tried to put roots down in England, but it just feels like, despite being where I was born and technically my land, yeah, there's a feeling that it's not my place. And yeah, there's a longing to be near South America.
I know that longing. Children and family and other responsibilities and obligations are keeping me well rooted here in Australia for the time being.
I don't have those yet. I have a dog, but I feel like she's going to love Peru. She's got a life of her own. She just loves to run off and just go take herself for a walk for 5 hours. And in England, that's not culturally sanctioned. But in Peru, it's like, that's normal. I just know she's a Peruvian dog in an English place.
A Peruvian dog in spirit, heart, soul, and spirit.
Yeah.
Hey, I mentioned spiritual chiropractor there in the intro. I know that you're privy to that. Would love for you to drop us into that story, because I reckon it's going to springboard us into this greater theme of embodied transformation. So I remember that you shared something on Instagram about a session that you had with one of your guests. It was a remote healing session, and you could say that the guests went through a spontaneous recalibration. And then how you, tongue-in-cheek, said that you were adding spiritual chiropractor to your resume. So give us the little story of that.
Yeah, actually, as you shared that, I was like, I can't remember who that was. So it's like, there's so many amazing things that happen with the shamanic work, and it's just so profound. But as you spoke, I was like, I just remembered who it was. Great. So yeah, it's just that inner alchemy, when that inner part shifts. And a lot of the way I work now is so intuitive, based on all of the healing work I've done on myself personally in the last 10 years, all of the trainings and the courses I've done. And so essentially, when we close our eyes and go internal, then we can root out these densities and blockages. And essentially with this one woman, we went deep inside, worked with the blockage, integrated that in a healthy way within her system, and then she had 3 spontaneous like cracks in her spine, and was like, and she wasn't even moving in that moment. Like, it just happened. And it reminded me of this incredible facilitator called Kamalroop Singh, who is a Sikh. He's a Sikh. There's 3 lineages of Sikhism in North India. There's I don't know the other 2, but there's one warrior lineage, which is all about wearing blue, having a sword, riding around on horses. They're very they're kind of almost like the Heyoka or the jester lineage of Sikhism. They're just like, we don't give a fuck. And they're really quite something. And they have cannabis as their sacred sacrament. And so they make a brew with poppy seeds and all kinds of things and Ayurvedic herbs. with the cannabis, and then they call that drink deg, Degh. And they drink it, and then they pray over the guru, which is the big book, the scriptures of that lineage. And one woman, he said, had a lifelong scoliosis, like a big deep curve in the spine. And she drank the dig, and then they were praying, and he was chanting, and just at the end, she also had this spontaneous like, and her scoliosis was gone, was completely gone. And so these kinds of healings, when we work on the inner energetics in a really powerful way, I truly believe anything's possible.
Do you ever find yourself articulating these ideas and concepts to the skeptical mind?
My own inner skeptical mind, or other people's?
Well, there you go. Wow. Well, yeah, maybe both. I mean, I guess there's a question there around articulating the mechanism or the way that, it's just not remote healing. It's a larger conversation with this, but, particularly having that experience in the Western medical paradigm, how might you articulate something like remote healing and how something like that could be possible?
This is the bit where I always wish that my brain retained all the scientific information, because I know there's a study where I believe they split, was it an atom? They split in half, and they took one half. This was a study by physicists. They took one half in a lead container to the other side of the world, and then they observed the other part of the atom that they had split. And when they observed one part of that atom, the other part in the lead box, like thousands of miles away, completely shifted its behavior. And that's essentially how remote healing works. It's that we're all interconnected on this energetic plane, and that the observer shifts that reality. And so I would explain it in the sense that there's lighter and more refined levels of energy. So we have the physical matter, and this is something that the medicine wheel speaks to, how we move through the medicine wheel, because we go from physical matter to emotions, to the symbolism and the mythic, and then up into the energetic. And it's almost like this wheel, and that's manifestation in reverse. So the energetic at the very highest level of the quantum field is where we can actually do work up there, and then that trickles down through that spiral of the wheel into physical form. But there's layers of matter that are being affected. And similarly, if you want to look at that on the energy bodies in the yogic traditions, we have the like Ananda Mayakosha, whatever Mayakosha. Again, I'm useless at remembering these things, but we have like the physical vessel, then the next auric layer out, then the next layer out, then the next layer out, and the next layer out. So when we're doing this kind of healing work, you can be working on the emotional body, the energy body of the blueprint of the physical vessel. And when we fix things on one level, it trickles down into the physical. So it's a simple, like almost osmotic gradient of density. And yeah, but trying to explain that to someone who hasn't drunk ayahuasca is like, yeah.
Quantum entanglement is the word, isn't it?
Is that it? Great. That's it.
We'll run with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've often been curious, like particularly with someone like yourself, with your background in the medical field, like how you feel like that influences your approach towards the world of shamanism and psychedelia. And it's certainly probable that you've mused on this before, that this intertwining of worlds perhaps gives you a unique, interesting way of building bridges and being able to articulate the path of health and healing in unique ways. And then, adding on to that, it's probably no surprise to you that it's a common conversation in the spiritual or conspiratorial, or let's say a traditional alternative natural medicine world, none of which I'm against. I'm not against any of these conversations or worlds, but that conversation often touches upon the Western medical model and how it's often rooted within the scientific, mechanistic, reductionist paradigm that leaves very little room, if none at all, for the inclusion of these metaphysical ideas or spiritual dimensions of life, and rather that's often relegated to the realms of spiritual philosophy or pseudoscience and these types of conversations. So yeah, I don't know if there's a question in there, but maybe it'd be great to hear you share about that relationship or your relationship to all that.
Yeah, it's a weird one. And I once had another medicine practitioner And I have had this quite a few times where I've worked with certain medicine practitioners and then realized afterwards that they weren't very good. And he actually he actually he actually cursed me because words are spells, and he told the participants after I left that I was cursed because I had been a doctor, and that had actually influenced my capacity to expand into essentially right brain functioning, this more creative, mystical, intuitive side and part, and that actually my left brain, because it was so overdeveloped, was just pulling me back, and that I would never be able to expand into those things. And at the time, I was like, "That's not cool." Like talking to my clients about the fact that I'm cursed. But actually, considering it, there is a part of me that does hold back, and like when you said, when you speak to the naysayers, the disbelievers, and that's why I said, "Do you mean me?" Because every day I'm pretty much like, this is all nonsense. I'm crazy. And it's just still instilled in me. It's still instilled in me. And he was actually right to a degree, but I don't see it as a curse. And it's wonderful because I feel like to truly have to convince myself almost every time I do these things it's good. It keeps one humble. It keeps one's mind active. And absolutely, I think it really helps because I can still feel the part of me that thinks it's all nonsense. And so I know how to speak to people who are like this, like explain that then. And however, there's a point where I think most people have this at the start of the journey where they're like trying to convince everyone. And it's this really hard process because embodiment was a key theme you wanted to touch on today. And there's only so much one can understand from the level of mind. And it's just really hard work trying to convince someone who won't be convinced. We have to have these embodied experiences through plant medicine, through our own epistemological direct knowledge. And that's the only way I think most people are going to open up and change. So it's helpful to have been a doctor to help people to get ready to the point where they will then have that direct experience. However, most people will not be convinced at the level of thought.
Yeah, I hear. I certainly don't have that background in the scientific education, but I find that the levels of skepticism and consideration and discernment that I bring to it, it's useful to me because I'm often curious and questioning and kind of raising my eyebrow at a lot of stuff. But yeah, it feel like it keeps me grounded and it keeps me humble and it keeps me curious to the multidimensionality of all of this work that we're experiencing. And you touched upon the theme, embodied transformation. I was thinking about how it's a funny term, really. Hear me out for a second. So embodied transformation, you might consider it to be a strange term because, as you were saying, if all is interconnected to varying degrees from the physical, the psychological, emotional, energetic, spiritual, you could say that, in actuality, you can't compartmentalize them, as much as people may try. And perhaps this is why we might see people perpetuating and getting stuck in stages of dis-ease. But, with that context that everything is connected, then if there is a true transformational process that occurs, you could say that quite naturally, it's going to be embodied. And there's a tag along to that. It's like you could probably find similarities in some of the phrases that we say, like, let's go for a nature walk, or let's go eat healthy, organic foods. It's like that. It's just such a funny concept. We're so disconnected from nature that we can't just go on a walk. It's got to be a nature walk. Or we're so disconnected from food that we have to talk about healthy, organic food. And I wonder if the same thing applies because we've been so disconnected from our embodiment and this idea of transformation, like so separated from the body that we have to call it embodied transformation to kind of help contextualize this larger process. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's what one of my mentors calls a head on a stick. It's like we've all just been like, until we come to this work, I can only speak to myself, actually, and many of the clients that I work with, that we come in and it's just like, here, we're up here, and it's all mind. And so, yes, the mind is connected to the body. Yes, it's constantly transmitting all these impulses through the neurons and whatnot. But at the same time, we're not aware of it. And I guess embodiment to me is attached to present and aware consciousness, it's like we allow the consciousness to drop down into other levels of our being. And yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. It's, even though there's all these different layers in the yogic belief systems of our energy bodies and the auric fields, it's all interdigitating. It's just like, it's not like there's a line and it's like this layer becomes that layer. It's like, no, we're all interdigitated, and that's definitely a more true and real vision of what's going on here. But I agree with you. It's very interesting. It's like, I'm going to go and be in nature. It's like, but you are already in nature. Like, you can't not be in nature. You are nature. It's so silly. I agree.
Well, then, what might you articulate as some of the, I don't know, pillars, marker points, things to take into consideration when we're talking about embodied transformation? Like, do you have maps, models that you've developed or that you draw from to help people orient themselves to this idea of embodied transformation, and how some of these marker points along the way, might help us with the greater kind of preparation and integration process of, we're speaking, I guess, about this in terms of shamanic or psychedelic experiences, but it's just, of course, it's not relegated to these particular experiences, but transformational peak experiences.
Yeah. The Mazatec lady that I've been working with, Alejandrina Pedro Castaneda, a very powerful mushroom facilitator up in the northern Oaxacan mountain range in Mexico. All of her work really is about shifting blocked, dense, and held emotions. And I'd say that's a core pillar of my work, because when these blocked emotional densities are sitting in our being, then they're running the show, and they're not allowing us to ascend into higher states of consciousness, clarity of mind, and take the kind of action that we need to take to be embodied, to live in an embodied way, in a conscious way. And so, yeah, it's really interesting that her practices really are based on that, the emotional body, and that's a lot of the work I do really as well with my clients. My pillars are really based on the medicine wheel format that I work to, which is, it's actually a mixture of the Andean view of reality, the cosmology of the Andean shamanism. However, their view is that there's a lower world, a middle world, and an upper world. And Alberto Violdo of the Four Winds lineage and school, he came and he actually took their concepts and their animal archetypes and placed them on a more North American medicine wheel, which is a compass-based wheel, and he added in the archetype of the hummingbird. So there's the serpent, the jaguar, the hummingbird, and the eagle, or the condor in the Andean lineage, or the eagle from North America. And so it's, the emotions are represented by jaguar. The serpent is old stories and shedding old skin. And when I bring people into the serpent direction, it's very much about reviewing the past. So this is often in preparation for a psychedelic experience. Like, it's nice to do this kind of groundwork before we get into it, because people are coming with a lot of fear, a lot of resistance. Often they want to come, but there's something in them is scared. And it's often that, again, that emotional density, or something extraneous to the self, i.e. an entity, if you believe in that. Again, my left brain is still questioning that reality often. But I've seen some things that I'm like, probably real. And so the serpent is there to help shed the old. And so it's very much the retrospective contemplation of life. And then when we come to the jaguar, we can start to process emotions in a safe space without the medicine. By the time we get into the north, which is hummingbird, it's very much about service to the community, being seen, being out, willpower, perseverance, the solar plexus radiating that energy, the solar energy. The hummingbird's connected to San Pedro cactus, which again is very much this like outward open, like life doing energy. It's less about inner reflection and contemplation and more about coming out. And so by the time we get to hummingbird, it's beneficial to have done the plant medicine, because then we can have gone in and dredged it all up and emerged, hopefully with good integration, into good lessons and a feeling of lightness and like, oh, okay, there's this new phase I can move into as an upstanding member of my community. And then eagle and condor, very much this like liminal connection to the divine, to lightness, to self-transcendence. And so that's tools like meditation, breath work, visioning, connection to our spiritual practices. And again, in reality, when we talk about these things, like you said, it's all at once, it's all interdigitated, it's all connected. So of course it's never as cut and dry as each section at that time. And the psychedelics always come between the West and the North. It's often a lot more organic based on where each person's at. But those are the core pillars I'm generally working towards. And then the tool of coaching is the final thing I'm going to say, because coaching, unlike therapy, and I'm not a trained therapist, which I tell anyone who signs up with me, I'm a shamanic healer and I work with coaching and medicines. And please don't confuse me with a therapist. That's not something I can provide. So I make sure people are very informed of that. And coaching is just such a beautiful addition to this work, because when we go out in our lives after these experiences and we want to become more embodied in what we've realized and learned, and bring that consciousness of the higher self and all those insights we were gifted into our lives, then we need to know how to take action in a good systematized way. And so therapy is often about the past, and certain CBT practices are about how do we manage ourselves in this moment now with what we know to be true. However, coaching and all those visioning practices, like, what do we want to create? And that's where it gets really exciting to me. It's like, wow, we get to help envision and then backtrack and make systematized steps towards that. And that's my bag. That's where I get super excited about. And I feel like it is such a core piece of good psychedelic work. And it's something in the indigenous communities that they wouldn't have needed to focus on, because they would all be in their community, constantly accountable to one another all the time. And it's like, but something that us, so in hyper individualist culture in the West, so busy in our lives doing us, me. And it's just like, we need that lifeline really to help us if we're not living in community in that way.
You mentioned hummingbird up in the north. How do you orient yourself around the medicine wheel? Where do you start? Do you start over in the east, or
we start south? South in the south.
So
and then
right, south.
Yeah, and then go west to
serpent.
jaguar, then north to hummingbird,
gotcha.
and then finish in the east.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you, because you've mentioned a couple of different lineages here. You've mentioned Valoldo, who has been immersed in the Andean traditions, and then you've mentioned that he's been implementing that into North American medicine wheel ideas. You mentioned your Mexican mushroom teacher. You've got your coaching as well. You didn't mention anything about your coaching, not that you need to, but I'm also curious about, have you explored the medicine traditions or any of this kind of map of consciousness regarding or pertaining to the medicine wheel from the lands on which you're from, and trying to orient yourself to, or orient the directional compass and what they represent to any of the beings or spiritual elements or creatures of the land over in the UK?
No, is the short answer. I do not feel invested in my country, which is a really interesting dialogue I've been having recently. It was an amazing man I met in Pisac in Peru a few months ago, who I was saying, I was like, I'm just ready to leave England. It's not my place. Because I didn't grow up in England. I was born there. And then after 3 months, I left and went to live in the Middle East till I was 9. And I came back a few times here and there in summer, but it just... Yeah, it just never felt like my place. It was very traumatizing to return to England, having lived in a completely different culture for so many of my formative years. And the weather, the heaviness, the density, the history of that country, And so, I tried to emigrate in 2018, failed, came back, and I'm again going to attempt my emigration this October. So it's a country I love. There's many people I love there. I have been connecting a lot to the nature elements there in recent years. However, in terms of anchoring myself in because I hear what you're saying very much. When you have a medicine wheel, there's a reason why certain things are in each direction, and it's contextual to the land you're on. And yeah, it feels important for that to be culturally and geographically contextual. And that's probably why I'm moving to Peru. I'm like, okay, when I go over there, my medicine was going to make sense. But yeah, no, it just hasn't felt like a place I want to invest that energy. No.
Yeah, when I talk about ancestors or ancestral lineages, I often use the language those of blood and bone and those of spirit. And, you know, for some of us, sometimes those of spirit just reach out and claim us a lot stronger than those of blood and bone for whatever reason.
It's really interesting because my heritage is from India. My surname Pardhy means man of the foothills, from Maharashtra down in Nagpur, south of Bombay. And, you know, I'm an eighth Indian, which seems tenuous. My great-grandfather was fully Indian. And but I hold that direct lineage through my grandfather, great-grandfather, father, me, you know, firstborn, and all through that patriarchal line. And again, I don't feel in any way connected to India. It's really fascinating. I went there and I was just like, eh. But when I listen to the rattle songs of the Native American church, the lineage of peyote, when I spend time in Mexico and all these cultures, it brings my spirit alive and my soul and my heart, and I have to trust that, you know.
Yeah, well, you just touched upon that, the rattling your prayers, this new creation that's been birthed through you. How did that come to fruition? Tell us a little bit about that.
That was a really long journey of losing my voice from pretty much 2018 until a few months ago. Yeah, it started with acid reflux, digesting my vocal cords. Then it went into something emotional that was contracting my voice and literally like clamping down my throat. And then I think Cambo also negatively impacted my gut microbiome to the point where I was having that dysbiosis that led to the reflux. So this is just to mention to anyone who is doing Cambo regularly, just to really make sure you're taking probiotics and refeeding your gut bacteria, because I feel like I killed off, because it's such a potent antimicrobial, I feel like it killed off quite a lot of my good gut bacteria, and that led to the reflux. So anyway, it's a long journey of and really a dark night of the soul, losing my voice because it's my primary medicine tool, you know. And when finally, after a throat operation this January, I emerged and was like, oh my gosh, like my throat, it's open again, I can sing. And it was like the joy that came from that birthed Rattle Your Prayers, which was a 6-week course in learning how to rattle with it wasn't like pure straight Lakota lineage songs. There was some in there, like the more phonetic song styles, but very much the rattling style of that kind of like galloping horse style of rattle. That was very much the anchor. And then people could sing either straight songs, which were the straight meaning no English words, all phonetic Lakota words, or they could sing some with English in, or whatever they felt like, to be honest, whatever they could sing really from their heart and as a beautiful prayer. And so, yeah, that was a 6-week course that actually finished last week.
Yeah, I noticed you used the past tense word, was. Are you planning on running this again?
I don't know. I'm
okay.
I'm in the present moment right now. I feel like I'm very likely to. When that's going to be, I don't know, because I'm launching another intensive 8-month mastermind, which is going to take a lot of my energy the next few months. But probably, I think when I'm grounded in Peru in October onwards, I'll reconsider it. Yes.
The surgery on your throat, was that a major or minor operation?
So essentially, I'm apparently, all those conspiracy theorists are like, everyone's lizards. All these evil people are lizards.
Oh,
I'm
you're a
like,
lizard person, eh?
I'm a lizard because it's like so funny. So I had my tonsils taken out when I was 22. They were taken out for various reasons. And I was noticing a lot of discomfort on the left side of my throat. I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And I looked in the mirror finally one day last summer, and I could see my left tonsil had like fully regrown and was just there. Like, I was like, that's very strange. I didn't have a left tonsil before. It was gone for a decade. Anyway, so I went to the doctor and they're like, I think we need to cut that out and just check it's nothing bad. I was like, great, I'd really like that. So I actually had a left-sided tonsillectomy for the second time back in January. So it wasn't a massive operation, but it was required general anesthesia and 2 weeks of intense discomfort. Yes.
And then have you, I'm guessing, I'm going to presume that you have ruminated to some degree on what the psycho-emotional or energetic components were to that operation, allowing the voice to then open to a greater degree.
Yeah, so when they looked at the histology of the tonsil, they said it was changes of chronic tonsillitis. So I think what it was just like this pain and kind of feeling of density and like tugging down in my throat. And yeah, I think just that not being there has just lightened the energy there. But honestly, the more emotional aspects of why I feel my voice was closed was that traveling a lot, the way my own attachment style works, how I am as a personality, is that I have been very independent and quite isolated in some ways in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and haven't honestly been creating the situations to fully be seen and honored by colleagues and community. And it wasn't until last summer that I was invited to staff and crew on one of my teacher's mastermind retreats. We had plant medicine, all kinds of things. That actually I was seen by colleagues, and something in my system, I think, had been afraid, or there was such a level of mentalization of my work, and not truly believing maybe in its power in some way. And it wasn't until last summer and then a few things I've run since then with other colleagues that I've been like, wow, I actually know what I'm doing. I'm good at my job and I appreciate people. They appreciate me. And this is just good. And I felt like there was a real release that could only happen in the bosom of community. And that has happened in the last year.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, well, I mean, rattle your prayers. It's really, from what I gather, it's all about learning the art, the medicine of sacred song. And then you could make a distinction here between ordinary song, perhaps, and sacred song. And there's a question here around how might you typically frame the difference between ordinary song, sacred song, medicine song, and then in that, have you ever thought about the difference in perhaps how these songs are offered, like in terms of performance of a song versus a sacred song or a medicine song really being a prayer as opposed to performance? So it's something that I'll sometimes muse on, and I'll offer a framework around that during sacred ceremony myself. But yeah, it'd be great to hear you riff on that.
This is great because it's currently 9:42 a.m. here, and literally at 10 o'clock last night, I was on a summit speaking about this exact topic last night with NPO Nation. And so literally less than 12 hours ago, someone asked exactly the same question, which is just amazing. It feels like a real zeitgeist right now on the planet that we all get to come and offer our voices, to contribute with song, to bring our heart song to the world right now. It's just so needed. And I actually was watching a BBC, I think it was a David Attenborough program on some Amazonian tribes, and they were walking through the jungle, and they were all singing and humming and whistling and making little sounds. And I think David was saying over the top, he was saying, this tribe believe that song. And just, I'm going to do my David Attenborough
Keep going.
impression.
This is great. Go on.
This tribe believes.
I'm laughing at how great it is.
So I got the posh English accent too. This tribe believes that song is the best offering to the nature spirits because they can truly receive it. He said something like that, and it was like, wow. And it was on this, you know, that program is not like a spiritual program or whatever, but it was so profound. I was like, wow, you know, first there was the word, and the word basically made everything in the known universe according to the Bible. And it is just so powerful when we sing. And singing itself, I'm reading an amazing book right now. I can't remember the exact title, but it's like the chakra sounds or something like that. I can give it to you to put in the notes. But essentially it says that the difference between healing songs and other kinds of songs are that there is intention. There is intention for healing. And it's a really interesting one, because I know when I read, is it Moto's? I can't remember his first name. The man who did all the research on water. Emoto?
Dr. Emoto, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's it. So he, whenever I read his research, I get a bit like irked. I'm kind of like, because he's just like, we played these plants, beautiful classical music, and then they were happy, and then we played the water, and then we played the water hard rock music, and it grew in all these really like uneven, jagged ways. And I was like, is this you projecting your beliefs around hard rock music into the water? And that's actually why it went like that, because I feel like if you go to a beautiful concert, for example, and you're listening to someone thrashing it out on a guitar, and there's like such deep emotion, and it evokes in you, it's attunement, it's a resonance, it evokes in you a really deep emotion. And it's not necessarily that they've been trying to heal you in any way. But it's just done with such emotion, and you're there, and there's a communitas, you know, a real sense of like, we're all in this together. And that in itself is so healing, to be part of that crowd, to be with them. So it's an ongoing contemplation for me. Like you said, you've mused on it a lot. Like there's a reason, because it's an unanswerable question. But in that book that I just shared, they say that the music is when it's harmonic tones plus intent. So it has to be a harmonizing sound with intent to heal. And certainly I can understand that in the healing context. However, I've seen anomalies in my, you know, I might be premenstrual and driving in my car and put on loads of like emo songs that I loved when I was 14, and it's just perfect, and I'm there, and it's just like, I love it. It's just like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. And then like 3 days later, I would just so not want to listen to that music, but it was right in that moment, and it felt great. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting one. But yeah, Icaro's medicine songs in a ceremonial space are profound. There's intuition is a massive part of what comes to be sung, and a real feeling into where the group are at, or where an individual is at, and what you're trying to call into the space to support them with where they're at.
Yeah, I know that Emoto, I believe it's Dr. Masaru Emoto. I know that his work gets a lot of criticism, but from what I read a couple of years ago, if you're familiar with Dean Radin, he wrote the book Real Magic. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, him and his team went a step or two further when it comes to Emoto's research on intention, and how it can affect physical matter. And with the studies that they did, they just further added evidence to this notion that, yeah, what the mystics, the esotericists, the spiritualists, the medicine people have been saying since day dot is indeed true, that our intent absolutely does matter. And I wish I could remember his name, Jonathan Goldman or Jonathan Goldstein. He has a lot to do when it comes to, I want to say music as medicine, but I guess it's more than that. And he speaks about, I think it's him that's spoken about this idea that, we've got sound healing, sound journeys. They're such a big thing, and we have so many beautiful world instrumentation available to us for these sound healing journeys. But when it comes to instrumentation, each of us have the most powerful technology within us to induce healing, and that instrumentation is the sound of our very own voice.
Yeah, 100%. Even from the physicality of humming, like just then I was like, And that's an embodiment piece too. That's a really great way we can start to drop into our body, is hum and down. And as we do that, it vibrates the sternum, it vibrates the vagus nerve, it drops us into parasympathetic rest, digest, heal state. So yes, we have that. The sacred Om is a big part of that too. And but then, yeah, the voice on another level, it opens the heart. It literally opens the heart as we sing. And that is the most important key we can unlock to allow our body to go into a healing state.
Through this course and through your work in the shamanic space, what have you noticed or what have you identified in terms of the blockages that really stop someone from this space, the vocal space, the vocal chakra, the throat chakra, from being open? And because, it's more than just voice, it's about expressing truth, walking our truth, standing in our truth.
Yeah. I feel, and many people say that a lot of them, you can only really have negative emotional states held in the lower 3 chakra centers. That you can only really have, I don't know what you'd call it, in the Andean lineage, it's hucha. It's heavy energy, held in those lower 3 centers. And so I would map it onto those 3 centers to say that number 1 is fear. So fear in the root chakra, that could stop us from sharing our voice, from possible experiences as a child, being told to be quiet, shut up, you can't sing well enough, whatever it is. These things. And then the sacral chakra, because it's interesting, when there's a block in the sacral, it really can affect the throat. These 2 chakras are connected. There's a tandem energy system going on there. And that's our creativity. That's trust in our creative capacity, the belief that we are a creative being. That's unlocking of our sensuality. So many of us haven't been allowed to move our bodies in a way, told to sit still at school. And so we've kind of become these automatons, these like formalized, rigid beings that, couldn't maybe find the space or didn't feel it was safe to move in our true sensuality. Again, repression of sexuality in cultures, and that impacts the voice. And then the solar plexus is very much about, it's hummingbird again to me. It's very hummingbird energy. I find here are we safe to radiate out? Do we have the self-esteem? Have we been seen? This is what was blocked for me, I believe. And there's a bit of everything actually, but this was a big one. It's like, have we been seen and received by our community to the point where we are like, I belong here? Because a massive core wound of so many people is, there's something inherently wrong with me and I don't belong here. Like I am different to everyone. I'm an outcast. There's something about me that is wrong or doesn't belong. And so I truly believe that through being with community, through being held, through being witnessing is so important, that we can start to radiate out from that center, and that it then all trickles upwards energetically to the throat. And of course, the heart is a big part. There's so many blockages we can have there. It's a different kind of blockage from the lower 3 chakras, but it's singing can really help us to open the heart, and that then fully is what allows the heart. Because when we sing from mind, when we're singing from up here, there's always going to be a slight constriction in the voice, like a nasal tone, like a kind of, because we're coming from an intellectual space, but when we drop into the heart space and are singing from our lower belly, which is where the breath as a pump is coming from subdiaphragmatically, then we have the full power of the voice, the full power of our connection through the root to the earth. If we're going even further down, then we're held by mother to allow the energy of earth to move up through that heart frequency and into the throat. So it's alchemy, and it's a somatic map, and it takes a long time sometimes to connect to. And there's some days where I still can't, completely, like, hand on heart, humbly. Like, there's some days where I'm still disconnected, and it comes out like a little tight squeak. I'm like, ugh. But when it opens, it's like, oh my God, that's the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a huge journey for me over the years, and I would say that, ayahuasca to some degree, but primarily Wachuma has been one of the greatest allies to help me open up my throat center. And no surprise that Wachuma is often considered to be La Medicina del Corazon, medicine of the heart, opening up the heart, and of course, opening up so many of the other centers too. But, it's interesting that you say that. A lot of my reservations about singing came from back when I played drums in punk bands and pop punk bands, like in a past life, like well over a decade ago. And when I would be doing group vocals or singing along with others, there were a few sly remarks here and there about not being able to sing. Oh. But a lot of it was because it was actually coming from up here, and there was still a lot of stories, and not just like embodied stories really, around self-worth and self-esteem and not being loved, and a lot of these kind of core wounding themes that you're speaking to. So it's no surprise that my voice really wasn't anchored down in my body, and it really wasn't until I started working with the medicines in a deep way that it allowed that to open up. And I'm curious to know if you've worked with any medicine people or healers that don't use their voice in a way of singing through their ceremonies.
Yeah, I know one incredibly powerful healer who doesn't sing in her ceremonies. She's really well respected. Holds bufo.
That's so interesting.
Holds mushroom, holds cambo, but she just plays the music on her thing. But it's like her space holding is so profound. Like she works with a lot of like the stars in LA and whoever, but it's not her shtick.
Yeah. Do you ever find that your medicine songs or your Icaros come through in particular like environmental context for you? I mean, for me, it's often in a body of water or near water, particularly if it's flowing like in a creek or a stream, but also in the shower too. Shower is a big one for me. It's like as soon as the shower comes pouring on my head, it's just like they just want to flow. And that's no surprise to me with someone with like a huge kind of elemental kind of astrological chart who's like primarily water and fire too. But yeah, it's clear to me that the flow of water is particularly conducive when it comes to the flow of medicine songs wanting to come through me.
Love this question. I love it. I actually, as I tied up the course last week, I received 2 songs on the same day that just came through when I was on top of a hill and it was all windy. And I was meditating on this concept that is touched on in a book called Wild, which I cannot, again, I wish my memory would love to remember all the names of things. It just doesn't. And touched on again in many indigenous cultures that many languages, like indigenous ancient languages, do not have the word I. They do not have the word me. There's often this deep isness with nature. It just is. And so it's even saying going for a walk in nature, it's like I am a thing and I'm on top, I'm in this other thing. Whereas a meditation that I've been inviting myself into recently is walking with nature or as nature. And I was meditating on walking as nature on top of a hill. And I was like, well, even saying I am the wind is faulty in that meditation. So I was as the wind, and that's when the songs came through. So that's a deep shamanic practice, actually, is to often shamans will call upon certain animal spirits. They have a power animal, or in the influence of the medicine, like a jaguar might come and jump into them or take over them, or they might ride like a snake. Something happens where there's animal energy that comes to them. And yeah, as the wind, it was almost like when I was the wind, that's when the songs were coming through, because the wind was giving me the songs. And my main experiences of receiving songs are in three places: when I'm in the wind, when I'm communing with the sun. The sun often gives me songs, and I also, as a Sagittarius, many fire element aspects in my chart, receive a lot from the sun, that solar energy. And then the third place is when I am about to go to sleep. And it's a really frustrating moment to receive a song, because it's like you're about to go to sleep and you're like, how am I going to remember the song? And I always make sure I have my phone there, and I press the record button, sing it into the phone, press stop, and then put it down and go to sleep. So yeah, those are my three places. But I'm really playing with this being as elements, and I find when that human element is out of the picture, that then the songs come through much easier.
Is there a link there that you can speak to when it comes to being as the elements and then this greater concept that we're talking about of embodied transformation?
It's kind of taking me back to that Pocahontas song.
Which
They're
one's
like,
that?
da, 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 da. Like when she's talking about being the spirit of the wind and all the different elements, and it's really beautiful.
Oh, I
It's
wish I could remember it.
yeah, it's very much a shamanic tool that when like my teacher taught me, when before you do shamanic healing work, you drum to your power animal and then you invite it to come and be you. So you are essentially it, and it is you. It's guiding you through that amalgamation, that embodied connection between the two of you. And yeah, I feel when we are elements, when we invite elements in to be us, that embodiment is what allows us to hear. And it's a very deep animist practice in shamanism, which is that everything has consciousness, everything has spirit, everything has intelligence. And so it's almost humbling ourselves to the intelligence of these elements, that they can teach us, that they have things to share with us, that they actually love to be spoken to, they love to be engaged with. We did a beautiful ceremony 2 nights ago. Myself and another medicine practitioner were considering going in together on a big project of launching retreats together and really birthing something big between us. So we're like, right, as good medicine practitioners, we're like, okay, we're not going to do anything until we've sat in medicine together. And so 2 nights ago, that's actually why I'm here in Ibiza now. 2 nights ago, we took a heroic dose of the little children, and we sat by the fire. And oh my God, Kaida, it was unbelievable. The fire was talking to us the whole night, like literally like coughing and spluttering. We'd ask it questions and it was speaking to us, and it demanded that we gifted our altars to it as an offering. So we actually I put my kuripe in the fire. I put my mushroom in the fire. I put my moccasins in the fire. There was like a whole process. It was like a stripping down. The shirt I was wearing, I put it in the fire. There was a really profound fire alchemy that occurred. And the more we put in the fire, the more it spoke to us. And it never experienced anything like it. It was utterly profound. And that alchemy actually began because I was singing to the fire. I was asking for its help, and I was channeling a song, asking it to light fire in our solar plexi to keep us active in our practices, to ground us in the work that we're calling in to do. And as I was asking the fire for that help, it started asking us for our stuff. It was like, okay, cool, you want help? Then give us your stuff, you know? And as we did, it just became so powerful. The connection was tangible. And so this is the kind of you could say we're just a load of crazy people throwing stuff in the fire high on mushrooms. Sure, you can say that. But when you start to work with the alchemy of the elements, like they're not joking, they're not messing about. And that's why there are shamanic cultures over time who have trained practitioners from very young ages to be able to work with the weather elements, work with all these systems that the elements are a part of, to be able to truly commune with them. And it's very, very real.
Yep. Amen to that. I've certainly had my fair share of experiences, and I find that when I do approach I was going to say the elements, but just nature, the wild, when I approach with a sincerity and a humility to learn and make my offerings, there's absolutely a dialogue, a conversation that's happening. There's an interaction that's happening between myself and between the other. It's undeniable. Mushrooms.
Yeah.
Pretty strong relationship with mushrooms you have, from what I understand. Like, from what I remember, you were facilitating or co-facilitating some mushroom retreats in Jamaica from some time ago, from memory. And then I think you've been doing some stuff in between, haven't you?
Yeah, Jamaica was a trial trip to work with the organization Myco Meditations. It turned out that we had different ways of working, yep. And that didn't transpire to become a collaboration. Then there was work in the Netherlands with Synthesis Institute, which has since actually gone bankrupt, sadly, due to some investment choices around the Oregon psilocybin movement and setting up an organization there. But yeah, it's been a real journey. And again, that left brain, right brain dance of like Western therapeutic way of holding space with the medicine versus the more shamanic way of working with these incredible teachers. And having also not had my voice for the last 4 or 5 years in its full power, song and music often is such a central part to a ceremony. And so I ended up really working with playlists, like the playlist that Imperial College London were using, that Mendel Caleb created, and then adding my own music into that. However, what's really asking to be birthed at the moment is this creation of that's why I'm here in Ibiza, a crew, like a way to hold it so that it's live music. There's real visceral healing frequencies that are coming from another being near you in through the air. And it's been such a long journey, and different clients as well require different space holding. So I've been quite chameleon-like in how I will hold space based on what I feel people need and where my capacities lie. However, I feel the next era that is being called forward is a crew that is consistent and solid, and a community of that, and less of the lone ranger work.
Yeah. I'm having a side tangent here when you're talking about, I mean, it sounds like over the program that you're putting on, it's touching on this larger concept that we've, been poking at this conversation, which is embodied transformation. Because I feel like, in the psychedelic models, maybe not even like the Western medical model, but I get the sense that still within that word, psychedelic, I mean, being linked to the meaning of mind manifesting, and there can certainly be that misnomer that these experiences may only be relegated to the mind, the brain mind, rather than the psychosomatic, the psycho-spiritual connection that many of us know so well. And it's, there's something to be said there about the experiencing psychedelic experiences as being very kind of head-based consciousness, like altering up here in the mind. And I know it's an earlier viewpoint that I had when I first started off down this path of exploring these substances, mind manifesting up in the brain, alterations of the chemical constituents or whatever's going on a neurochemical level, well over 10 years ago, before I really immersed myself in this world. And then the greater understanding that the world of psychedelic, entheogenic, sacramental healing, it has to incorporate this body, mind, soul complex if we truly want to incorporate a sense of holistic awakening and healing and transformation.
100%. And beyond that, it has to involve community. I think that's what the psychedelic medicines are bringing us back to, is just we have to be part of a living, functional, interdependent. I mean, we already are interdependent on everything, but we have to acknowledge and see that and start to live that. Because I was just searching just then for the name of the man, because I was listening to Ian Mackenzie's Mythic Masculine podcast. A lot of the work I do seems to be with men. I hold quite a lot of masculine energy as a woman, and I'm also extremely passionate about supporting men to drop the nice guy thing. It's just, as a woman, I'm like, let's just create more men in the world who are fully embodied, who can step into dark masculine in a healthy way. I'm so passionate about it. And so I was listening to Ian Mackenzie's Mythic Masculine podcast, and there was a man whose name is Tayayaki Alfred, who I believe has some Apache lineage, and the episode is called No Accountability Without Community. And it really hit me, mainly because it was slightly triggering, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't really have the community I feel I need right now to step into that next level of my own embodiment. And that was a year ago when I heard that. That's when I had that experience staffing on that retreat and started to open by being witnessed by community. Because when we're speaking about embodiment, again, coaching, that's why you have a coach. So you're accountable over time to someone. That's why without community, whether that's a coach or actually our next door neighbor or our best friends or whoever it is, we're just not going to ever become what we are capable of, because our own there's some very strong people out there who are the leaders, the kind of pinnacle. And I believe when we look to spiritual leaders and true shamans, they are the people who have gone off on their own to do the thing without the support. And that is why they are such revered people in communities, because they maybe don't need what your average human needs to be able to go and do something truly remarkable. But yeah, most people need that accountability. And so I truly believe psychedelics are here right now on the planet to bring us back into community spaces, because without that, I don't see humanity going much further.
Yep, I hear. Does this link into, there's another side note tangent that my brain's going on. There was an inquiry, a piece of information on your landing page for Rattle Your Prayers that spoke to deconstructing the patriarchal, something about the patriarchal link. What is it? The patriarchal concept of song. You said that something to the degree of that keeps you from, singing your song or to truly being heartfelt or something like this. Is this? I don't know. My brain's picking up a connection here.
Okay.
Is there one? We could make one, I'm sure.
Well, I can definitely make a link. There's always a link to be made, and yeah, it's beautiful. So another piece around community is that it's ugly. There's gonna be disagreements. It's like, who's washing the dishes? Someone didn't do that thing. Like there's always the thing that people argue about. And I feel like when we are singing, so the patriarchy wants everything to be right, just so formalized, all in line, all in order. It's the whole, like, you can't sing in the school choir because you don't sing good or whatever it is. And actually, when you start to, some of the shamanic facilitators I know, like, for example, my Mazatec teacher, when she sings songs in ceremony, they're extremely simple, extremely sweet, and extremely basic. And no one would say that she has, like, the voice of an angel. She's just singing from her channeled heart song, what that person needs to hear. I'm remembering now some of, like, her ceremonies are just another level of weird. I love it. So there was one point where she had, like, the person in front of her who's really high on a large dose of mushrooms, and she's just, like, in front of them with this, like, maniacal look on her face, being like, I am the spirit of your ancestors. And literally just like doing this weird, like a kind of puppet woman. And I was like, this is freaking me out. I don't know how the person in front of her is feeling. But yeah, it was very much like whatever that person needed to receive, they received, like her channel is so pure. Whatever comes through is absolutely what is needed. And it comes back to this, like, there is no perfect, there is no the patriarchy. It's if you subscribe to that dynamic, you're not going to sing anything if you don't believe that it sounds good, if you don't believe that it's pitch perfect, if you don't believe that it's like the right moment or whatever. All these like mind-based concepts that stop the space holder from actually just singing what needs to be sung. And sometimes it can sound really ugly. Sometimes when you're actually attuning to an entity or a vibration that you want to vibrate out of that person, you have to meet it with like a sound, or like like you kind of want to out. It's like it's a, I learned this in Cambo, that there's purging songs, where you're singing a song that actually makes someone want to purge, because it actually sounds like purgy. And similarly with the Barbara Brennan Hands of Healing and her whole school of healing, which is what one of my shamanic teachers trained me in. It's like when we're vibrating out that density, then we vibrate that out with our voice in that heavy way. And then once we've done the extraction work, then we call in with the higher frequency, vibrational, often higher pitch, beautiful melodic sounds to come and bring those harmonic frequencies into the space. And so if you're subscribing to this patriarchal idea of like the good girl, like, got to sing it perfect, then you're just never going to give yourself the freedom to, again, emotions are such a big part, because you have to feel it. You have to feel that. You have to really allow yourself to drop in out of the head into the emotional space to find what is resonant, because we are emotional beings. We think we're logical. We think we're acting from our rational mind, but no one is ever acting from their rational mind. There's an ulterior motive that meets your needs on an emotional level with every action you're taking. And so, again, the patriarchy doesn't want you to be an emotional being. It wants you to be a rational being. And I'll leave that there.
Yeah, it makes sense when you're explaining it like that. Yeah, I mean, that's the way that I work with instrumentation as a healing technology too, starting with primarily, typically, most often, starting with the lower, denser, energetic vibrations, the drums, the didgeridoo, the gong, these sorts of things, and then moving up to the higher octaves to bring in those lighter harmonics into the space. But yeah, there's something to be said about the notion of ceremonies wanting to be, or needing, the idea of them needing to be polished, where I know that, in an archaic sense, when medicine people, and I'm thinking about Mongolian or Siberian shamanism here, when the shamans are in their trance states or they're working with people, there's a lot of weird things that can happen that might get frowned upon within the context of today's kind of shamanic or psychedelic spaces, in particular when we're talking about these spaces being trauma-informed and, being mindful of this kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things that can happen to induce certain types of energies or states of consciousness in the other that may not be particularly comfortable at all.
Yeah, that's healing. That's healing. It can get downright dirty and weird, and you just got to roll your sleeves up and get it out.
I hear. Well, we've been all over the shop. There's a lot of things that we've covered.
Yeah.
Or poked our rattle at. But let's start to round it up. I've been asking this question to a few people, and I'll ask it to you. And it's a question that, it's not the best question to ask at the end of a conversation, but I do it anyway, because it can often require a little bit of deliberation to give a sincere and thoughtful answer. But are there any questions that you might like to be asked that you don't often get asked?
oh my gosh, the way that my brain works, I'm like, you've just ejected me up into like the endless infinite cosmos with nothing to bounce against. And I'm like, now my mind is completely blank. Let me feel into it a little longer. I don't know. I get asked so many questions that are always the same, like, what made you leave medicine? There's just so many things that I'm like, here we go again for the 300th time. But gosh, the unknown is unknown, and it's by its nature.
The first time that I asked that question, it was one of my guests, Nathan Miola. He's a friend who lives here in Australia. And after some consideration, his answer was, I wish people would ask me more about my bear lineage. And I was like, ooh, that's, there's something there. It's something real juicy there. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll keep asking that question and see what percolates, because some interesting things might pop up. But also, it's a big question. Like I said, it can require some deliberation.
I feel like it's really interesting because on the internet these days, one still has to find clients. It's not like just because I'm here on this podcast as a thought leader or whatever reason you've invited me on, that like life's hunky dory and I've got millions of clients. Last year I actually found myself in debt because it was really hard to find clients. And a lot of people in the coaching industry, a lot of people aren't filling their retreats. It's been very hard last year, and a lot of stuff has picked up this year. But last year, for some reason, was almost like a drop off into a dead zone for many. And so, yeah, obviously marketing has come into that. Like, how do I find clients? Like, what is it? And so I was like thinking about niching, the concept of niching as a practitioner. And actually, when I first started my coaching work, they say sometimes you choose your niche and sometimes your niche chooses you. And the initial people who were coming to me were often men going through midlife crises. That seemed to be who I attracted. And as a result, also of my own lack of father. My father died when I was 5. His father died when he was 5. There's this long lineage of kind of fatherlessness. And like I said again, I carry a lot of masculine energy as a woman. And it just felt, because of the kind of clients I was attracting, that there was this deep pull to support the masculine, this deep longing to know and understand my own inner masculine, my own patriarchal lineage, and then these other clients coming through. And so hence I was listening a lot to Ian McKenzie's podcast, reading a lot of books like Iron John, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And that was the initial market. I was like, cool, I found my niche. I'm going to market to it. And then it felt like that dropped off as I discovered my own inner feminine. And then last year I moved towards supporting other medicine practitioners and people. I was like, look, I'm going to choose a new niche. That old niche didn't feel alive anymore. And then this year it's come through again. And so when you're asking, like, what question do you wish people would ask me more about? I would say, like, my love, like, why are you so interested in supporting men? Like, why are you so connected to helping men to transcend this nice guy to become embodied men? And because that, I feel it's calling me back. It's calling me back. And interestingly, no amount of like thinking about what niche I could market to helped me to have any clarity whatsoever. And it was actually just this calling back of the masculine, which I feel is happening now. And so, yeah, that's such a deeply passionate area of my work, and one I feel I'm going to step back into fully again.
Amazing. Yeah, well, there's certainly something to be said there around choosing the niche versus the niche choosing us, or something much larger than our sense of self reaching out and claiming us. And I've heard you speak to this before as we kind of wrap things up. It's this idea of listening to and finding ways to keep, like, I think you were speaking about it on a podcast in regards to, what does it mean to be a medicine woman in this day and age? And you said something to the degree of listening to and finding these ways to coalesce and amalgamate and integrate the vast influx of information that we have access to in today's day and age. And it's really through the embodied lens of our own unique gifts, characteristics, qualities, passions, and really you could just say medicines here, you know, our own gifts and unique medicines, and listening to how spirit, how life is really asking us to respond. And it certainly seems like you're in a place where you're being asked to respond to the masculine.
Yeah, I really feel it. It's something I just come back to again and again. And I think it's something deeply in the feminine. It's just this revulsion to men who are in this nice guy archetype. It's just like, you don't need to be there. You don't need to be manipulating to get your needs met. You don't need to be acquiescing. It's just so, it's just like, again, it's this geisha archetype that I felt came through in my late 20s and early 30s. I felt so connected to the geisha archetype. I was like, why? Like, I'm not a prostitute, I'm not a sex worker. And then I actually looked into the energy of the geisha, and it was like, wow, like she was never actually a sex worker. She was actually this very educated woman who would be a confidant to men in positions of high power, who's maybe their wife couldn't actually provide the support that they needed, or they, you know, a lot of the men that come to me are going through a divorce and they just need that counsel, that place where they can come and unburden themselves. And it's a really beautiful role that I'm very honored to step into.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how the spirits, the qualities, the archetypes, there's many different ways to kind of language something similar to what I'm pointing at here, but it's interesting how they can reach out and speak to us from, you know, some long time ago without us really having any conscious idea of why they're speaking to us, and only having that understanding drop in later on in life.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing I'll say to that is that I got a massive tattoo on my back when I was 22, mainly because my housemate at the time got one on her back. She got Kuan Yin, and it was this really beautiful like tiger, and Kuan Yin holding the willow, which is the tree of healing. And anyway, and I was like, I want one. So I went and got one, and I do not to this day remember my thought process. I wasn't like, I want to get a phoenix because of the death and rebirth cycles or whatever like that, or because it's connected to the fire or any of those things. But I just think I saw a picture on the internet of a Japanese looking bird, which had really beautiful tails and little hearts in the tail. And I was like, gosh, that's really pretty. And I got this massive tattoo on my back of a phoenix. And then, of course, 2 nights ago with the fire, it was like, here we are again, throwing everything in the fire and being reborn. Interesting that I have that archetype tattooed on my back. And so, yeah, I feel like these archetypes come and find us in these ways that are so beyond like our conscious understanding. There is a great mystery at work, which is continually humbling me, and I'm very sure humbling you. And it's really beautiful to surrender to that mystery, I feel, and not try to understand it with the mind, because we never will. And I feel great reassurance in that, actually. Yeah.
Those are some beautiful words to finish up with, Alex, I reckon.
Yeah. Oh,
How can
Kayuda, thank you
everyone
so
connect
much.
with you? Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Connecting with you, learning more about your work, staying updated on what you're offering. Social media, website under construction.
My website's been under construction for about 5 years, and
Okay.
don't get your hopes up on that one. Yeah, so I would say Instagram is where you can find me. You can type my name in on LinkedIn. I share all my stuff there too. I'm fully just reclaiming that patriarchal professional space as my artist's canvas, shall we say. So yes, LinkedIn, Instagram, Alchemy with Alex, Alchemy _ with _ Alex. And then on Instagram as well, you can find my mailing list link, which you can sign up to. And I do not send frequent emails, but there you will get updates on various pilgrimages and retreats I'm running. I'm running one in Mexico in a few weeks with my Mazatec teacher, and Rattle Your Prayers as well. It will be available as an in your own time course, and then I'm sure it will run live again probably later this year.
Okay. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I just want to say it's been so great to connect. We've been following each other's work from afar for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years by now, I think. And I just really honor your work and the work you're doing. And I hope we get to meet one day in person. And I just really feel your spirit, really feel your heart. and just blessings on your family, your work, and your life.
If spirit wills it to be, it will be. Alex, all right, let's wrap it up. Offering a big thank you to you for carving out some space time to have this convo. And if you're listening or watching to this, go tune in with Alex. Show her some love. And if you want to connect with me, you can do it via the website, kayudakiora.com, YouTube, search my handle on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you prefer, at Kayuda And thanks everyone for tuning into this episode. Hopefully there were some gems in here that have been as fruitful as birdsong on morning wind. Until next time.